writing a paper on Gramsci, and Gramsci's kind of a villain, even though some of his diagnosis of how politics works, I think, is accurate. Understanding Gramsci in broad strokes is relatively simple. He, like other socialist communists, they were a little confused after World War One because essentially you would think that that World War One would have brought the workers of the world together. The economic forces, they would see their connection to their other fellow workers and they would unite. Actually, what happened is they broke down along religious and nationalist lines. They became very faithful to their country. So Gramsci and others look at this, and Gramsci starts when he's in prison. He starts writing about, in his prison notebooks, the idea that culture is downstream of politics, essentially. Andrew Breitbart's famous quote. The the problem with Gramsci is not that he was wrong about that. I think there is a case to be made, it's a strong case, that culture is what determines politics. And that's why you see Ben Shapiro doing a rap song and the Daily Wire and other outlets covering pop culture more and more, this focus on Disney movies and so forth. The right wing is getting involved in culture because that influences politics. I do think there's a more subtle layer than even culture, and that's what you would say are metaphysical beliefs about the way things are. That actually precedes the cultural aspect, because what you believe metaphysically is going to determine what you like culturally and also the way you interpret culture. So Gramsci had this idea that there are hegemonies in the world. There's hegemonic thought. And people, especially the proletariat, the working class, they take things as common sense. Like, it's common sense that capitalism is good. It's common sense that I should have private property. It's common sense that I should be patriotic. It's common sense I should be in a nuclear family. It's common sense that there's a God. It's common sense that our consciousness, there's a dualism. I'm conscious and my mind and body are two different things, right? So this hegemonic thought feels natural to them. And the idea that Gramsci had was that out of the public, there would be these, what he called organic intellectuals that would arise. People who would start to see through culture and then start to change culture. Today we might call them influencers, right? Influencers would arise from every walk of life, and they would be like these new intellectuals. And the change wouldn't come from the top down, it would come from the bottom up, but even from the bottom up, you would have to have these leaders of thought. And these leaders of thought would arise from the subalterns, people who were, not, you would say, not fully conscious. Gramsci does his best not to be an elitist. I think he fails in this. But he truly believes that from the population, you're going to get these organic intellectuals, these people who lead the movement and start to change the culture, start to make the people question their common sense. Of course, he thought if this happened, the people would naturally start to move towards socialism and communism. He thought they would start to align with people like him, the geniuses of the world. That if the people just woke up a little bit, that they would start to think like Gramsci and other socialists and communists. That elitist strain is still in him. He's like, the leaders of the movement essentially have to, they're kind of waiting for the people to catch up. In 1984, Winston Smith says if there's hope, the hope is with the proles. It's with the working class. But there's still this idea that the people don't know what's good for them or what's best for them. And obviously that can be the case. I mean, people who vote for Fidel Castro or something, like, do you really know what's good for you? No, you've been brainwashed. The problem, of course, is it's not that the world doesn't operate by hegemonic thought, that certain hegemonic cultural ideas dominate. The problem is Gramsci inverted reality and picked the wrong hegemony to back and support and try to champion. There's different types of hegemonies. There's this communist socialist hegemony, which includes wokeism, progressivism, far leftism, Antifa, right? That's kind of it's under the same umbrella. There's the hegemony of, you might call it Dugin's thought, Putin's thought, that the world should be carved up, and each little carving up of the world can have their own morals and rules. There's no universal human rights. There's no universal values, really. Each culture designs their own life and their own style of living, their own right and wrong. I'm bastardizing this a little bit, but generally that's what they think. That's a hegemony. There's the hegemonies of theocracy, and then there's the hegemonies of what I would call Enlightenment principles, the founding of America. And what you have to see, if you're a wise person, is that the hegemony, the cultural ideas of the West, generally speaking, not completely, obviously, but generally speaking, the cultural ideas of the West since the Enlightenment are the only hegemonies you should be fighting for, fighting to defend. So Gramsci's, just to like sum up very briefly, Gramsci's idea is that there are cultural elements that direct politics. I think that's an accurate analysis, but again, I think underneath metaphysics are a little bit more important, and you have to get involved in culture. So the scary thing is, and this is why it bothers me that some right-wingers like Chris Rufo are starting to adopt Gramsci's, not the idea of culture being important. That's fine, that's true. But they're starting to adopt some of Gramsci's tactics. And he praises the prince, he praises Machiavelli. So you see the right starting to engage in Machiavellian tactics. You're playing with fire, right? It's not that can't be effective. It's not that it doesn't work. But when you start to use those dark arts, the dark energy, I think that's an appropriate term. I don't mean it literally, but I mean politically they're like dark arts. You're playing with some very, very nefarious forces that can take you over, that can taint your noble goals. And the Lord of the Rings warns us about this, right? The Ring of Power. Boromir wants to use it. He says, look at this ring. It's a gift. We should use it. And we know you can't wield that. The wise know you can't wield evil. It's what Gandalf and Gadriel were. Is that the right name? Gadriel? I can't remember her name. Sorry. I've watched The Lord of the Rings like 1,000 times, and I'm just brain dead right now. But they won't take the ring. The wise people don't take the ring, even though they would try to use it for good. But Chris Rufo and a lot of these people aren't wise. They're political creatures. Everything becomes political. It's kind of like you can see the right wing politicizing everything. A short term, I think it's going to be wonderful, but good luck keeping those demonic political forces under wraps, right? But you can already see it. You can see what it's awakening on the right with the anti-Semitism, actual racism. There wasn't as much, not that it's a large amount even now, but there's more actual racism against black people and Hispanic people on the right than there was a few years ago. Because they're starting to play that racial consciousness game. Not saying Rufo's doing this exactly, he's doing some other things, but a lot of people on the right are saying, well, if they want to play the racial consciousness game, we need to play the racial consciousness game, and we don't want Indians coming over here, for example, on visas. We don't want them. And there are a lot of right-wingers who have become essentially leftist, and people are using the term woke right. I've been talking about this for a long time because you could see it coming. You could see this building. If you go back and watch any of my videos from 5-6 years ago, I would talk about the woke, and I'd say you need to keep an eye on the right as well. They do the same sort of thing. There's a small it's a fringe, but it's a growing fringe. Okay, I didn't call them the woke right. I tend to call them the Volk right, right? Because Volk, V-O-L-K, you can make the associations you need to. But we have the right wing they're attempting to use Gramsci's techniques. I think there's one technique I sort of approve of, and it's the war of position. It means to start to occupy positions in the university in Hollywood where you get a conservative viewpoint, right? That's what I want. And it should not just be conservatives, but we need more conservatives there and traditional liberals. I agree with that sort of war of position mentality. Gramsci said there's a war of position. It's kind of like the long march to the institutions. And then you go to the war of maneuver, which is like, I guess, violent revolution. I don't think Rufo or any of those people want violence. I do think the idea, to get more conservatives to push in that way is smart. But then to use kind of the nasty tactics that the far left uses is inexcusable and dangerous, quite frankly. We can achieve our goals. It'll take a little bit longer, but we can achieve our goals without resorting to the nasty tactics that the leftists use. Just to wrap up, the one thing you see constantly is no matter the story, if it involves a woman or a minority, some on the right are shouting DEI the same way the woke would shout racist, no matter, before even knowing the details of the story. So we live in a Gramscian world. Let's hope it doesn't come back to haunt us.